What I do see is that there can be some niche or target markets for Linux. Have you ever tried to kind of
Hmm.
identify or cater to those markets instead of going after
Yeah.
general purpose, computers?
Mhm. Yeah, so one of the main target markets that we're actually focusing on starting from this year onward is actually going into enterprises, businesses that are small, large, even governments, schools, that especially are bogged down by the high price of the proprietary software that they're using right now. So one example is the city of Vicenza in Italy. They decided to start moving over to Zorin OS last year because they had a lot of computers that were running Windows XP. They were getting slow, and of course, the support has run out. So it just did not become a viable alternative to continue using those computers. And if they were to stay to Windows and stay in that ecosystem that they were locked into, they would have had to purchase a whole load of new computers, which was just not financially viable for them. So they actually discovered our operating system and saw how simple of a transition it would be to move all of the workstations from Windows over to Zorin OS, and the fact that users would have to have minimal training. They just saw that as a huge advantage, and they get to keep their computers, so they're saving a lot of money. Um, we see an awful lot of organizations that are both small and large that could benefit of from such a circumstance. I mean, there's still, I believe I saw that there are around 15% of all computers who are still running Windows XP, which are in dire need of an operating system upgrade. And as well as that, in 2020, Windows 7 will lose support. So that's nearly 50% of all computers in the world are running Windows 7. They're going to have to make some sort of switch. Um, Switching over to Windows 10 is going to cost them, and perhaps the computer won't be powerful enough for that. So if we were to create a full ecosystem of management tools to help organizations to move over to Zorin OS and even other Linux distributions, that could become very influential in the market. And so that's what we're doing now. We're creating these management tools to make it really simple to switch over.
Right. Now you got my attention because enterprise, the market that I closely monitor, and that's the only market I care about. I really don't care about the
Mhm.
consumer space because I think it's moving to VR, and new interfaces are coming in, and more. I mean, PC market
Mhm.
itself is declining in the consumer space. Now, when you talk about, and that was going to be actually my question, because I was talking to Italo, from LibreOffice, the document
Mhm.
foundation, and his point was that most of the times, things fail because people try to move users from one platform, one application set to other, from Microsoft Office to LibreOffice, or from sorry, Windows. Let me get some water, to desktop Linux. And that never works because they have a lot of workload on the older platform. So you have to migrate the workload. You cannot just format the
Mhm.
drive and expect them to. You have to migrate their workflow. So when you talk about
Mhm.
these management tools, the first thing is what kind, because you're working with city of Italy. So number one is what kind of problems or challenges that you have identified after talking to the authorities, or who are people are responsible for this migration, and what solution you have seen in the open source world, and then how you plan to migrate them.
Yeah, so the environment actually in that regard is getting a lot more receptive to change. So you see that there are organizations that are moving over to, for example, Chrome OS and Chromebooks. And when you talk to IT administrators who make that switch, one of the most common advantages that they point out with Chrome OS is how easy it is to manage. So you don't have to go around to every computer and make sure that they're running the most up-to-date version of the antivirus software. You don't have to babysit users essentially through routine management tasks. They can actually get those done through a cloud-based console right from their seat. So essentially, we've heard similar complaints from the municipality of Vicenza that essentially some tasks were kind of repetitive and had to be done on all computers, and that was slowing down the transition from Windows to Zorin OS because they have to repeat an awful lot of package installations and updates throughout the year on each computer individually. So essentially, the tool that we're creating is allowing these IT administrators to administrate all of their Zorin OS and Linux-based computers as simple as it is once. So they'll be able to make sure that all of the computers have the latest security updates installed. They'll be able to install new packages, run scripts directly from that console, and be able to control exactly which computers get those changes and which ones stay the same. So essentially, that's one of the main gripes of moving over from Windows over to a Linux-based environment. It's just getting those details right, and that's what we're planning on offering next year.
So, are you working with any other most of these organizations? They don't use the operating system. They use applications on it, to manage files. So, how are you going to tackle the challenges with Microsoft Office or other legacy applications that they were using?
Yeah, so in a recent video that you showed, I saw that you mentioned how the LibreOffice team encouraged people to move over their applications before making the transition to the new operating system, which is exactly what we'll be encouraging to our prospective users. That way they'll be able to figure out exactly what are the pain points that they'd have to teach users how to use the new system. But also we want to make sure that those customers would be able to revert back to their Windows-based applications if necessary. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're including Wine out of the box in Zorin OS and the most up-to-date version as well. So you actually be able to run lots of Microsoft software, including some of the more recent versions of Office like 2010 and 2013. That would be possible. And on top of that, we're making sure that we're having the latest browsers so that if they want to use cloud-based Office suites like Microsoft Office 365 online, as well as Google Drive, that would be integrated into the desktop as well.
Now, this is something interesting, and a lot of people don't understand. But when you mention Chrome OS and Chromebook, they are like cloud-based, cloud-focused, distributions, and they don't much, believe in, the native application. They do cloud native. They run cloud native applications. A lot of people, I don't know what is your opinion, but people say no, there is no cloud. It's someone else's computer. I think whoever says that doesn't understand what cloud actually is. When you talk about cloud, you're talking about a cluster of computers, who are working together. You are scaling. You have elasticity. You have a lot of networking going on. There is storage going on where you have, not only availability, but cloud is totally different beast than a desktop computer that runs or a center. You can have cloud in your own data center also. Cloud is just a cluster of computers. Yeah. It's just a word which sometimes people don't understand. So as cloud native applications become more and more popular, and more and more organizations are moving to cloud. For example, look at Uber. There's no desktop application for Uber. You have to use what they have is a thin client which runs on your mobile phone or whatever it is. And everything is Netflix. You don't you watch the whole movie, but you don't have any piece which other than the thin client which runs on it. So as these cloud native applications become more popular, the platform that runs on your system will become irrelevant because everything is running in your browser. So that's where I see a huge scope for not only Chromebooks but also Linux-based distributions, which are kind of so while a lot of people in the Linux world get all upset about cloud, but cloud can actually help them because in reaching to the masses that they will like enterprise, almost everybody is moving to cloud native application, whether they are running it on AWS or OpenStack cloud or whatever, they are moving to, and they have thin clients which run those application natively. So from it's, government of Italy or city of Italy, how much of their workload is moving to cloud? Are you aware of any such things, so that we can see, okay, that may makes things easier in future, so they don't have to rely on Vine or something like that?
Yeah. So their switch over to Zorin OS was actually done at a very opportune time when they were actually making the switch over to cloud applications. So some of the applications that they relied on were Windows based, and there were custom ones, but they understood the move to cloud, and they're beginning to offer all of their applications on the cloud. There's still a few applications that are Windows only, and in that case, they have some Windows-based machines which workstations can VNC into, essentially. But essentially, that move over to cloud that they're doing is making it a lot easier for them to make the switch over to Linux. And in my opinion, the move over to cloud from native desktop applications, especially in the enterprise space, would only make Linux stronger in that regard.
Yeah.
It makes it so much easier to make the switch over, because when organizations are moving over, for example, to Chrome OS, which is the current popular trend, those organizations need to make sure that everything works in the cloud, in a web browser. And that web browser is also being offered on Linux-based desktops. We include Chromium on Zorin OS by default. So everything that works in Chrome OS works in our operating system, and of course, other Linux distros as well. And essentially, if we can make Linux a more advantageous choice than Chrome OS, then it could become the leader up beyond Chrome OS. For example, they might have a lot of computers that they would need to replace if they were making the switch to Chrome OS. They'd need to buy Chromebooks for all of their employees. In the case of Linux, they can just keep their existing computers, install Linux, have a desktop that doesn't cost anything to run. It only costs for the management and some software as a service tools to maintain. And that could be even more cost effective than switching over to Chrome OS. And on top of that, the native applications that are on Linux that would be, in some cases, more powerful than cloud applications would be able to provide that added advantage over Chrome OS. Right. So that's where we see ourselves competing against the other alternatives. The more modern organizations that understand that a cloud application suite is more advantageous and that are a lot more footloose to make the switch over to a new platform.
Okay, I'm a Chromebook user, and one of the biggest advantage of Chromebook, as you are also aware, is you don't have to worry about it's maintenance free. There is no worrying about. All you need to do is, because they have two operating systems installed, there's a switch. The updates are installed on the the one which is sitting in the background, and when you reboot, it just switches to and it takes like 1 second, and that's it. And there is nothing that can go wrong in a Chrome. I have never ever. I've been using Chrome OS from the CR48 days, and I had never had to kind of repair, or fix my Chromebook. Never broke. So how do you plan to achieve the same level of maintenance-free, upgrade-free experience from Zorin? Because that's kind of big, tall order to. Though on Linux, Core OS has kind of established, a mechanism where you can do the same, on the Linux as well. So how do you plan to create that experience for these people? And I'm talking of, once again, enterprise users who are looking at Chromebooks.
Yeah. So. One of the ways that we want to do that is through that new management suite that we're developing. We want to make sure that there are lots of different express settings. So if they want to be able to provide their users with the most up-to-date upstream updates, they'll be able to tick a box and make that happen. And if there are any issues, then it will be a simple rollback that they'll be able to make on the package side. But more interesting than that, on its own, is the move over to containerized applications on Linux. So Snap and Flatpak
I'm sorry, I'm
mainly.
interrupting you. Do you have kind of, somehow do you have a mechanism that you're reading my screen here? Because all the questions that I have written down, you're kind of jumping into those before I even mention them, whether it's management tool, whether it's Chromebook. So I hope you don't have any kind of spyware installed on my system, right?
No, no, no. It's just, I guess, great minds think alike, we can
Yeah,
say.
I think so. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, so these containerized application frameworks are really exciting. The fact that they'll be able to provide the latest version apps right to the users as they need them, and not having to worry about whether the newest libraries are available and if some breaking changes might happen. They'll be able to provide the newest version of the runtimes. For example, in Flatpak, the newest version of the runtimes would be available straight from the framework, as well as making it work together with all of the other apps. So say in an environment where both Flatpak and Snap packages live side by side, which is what we are planning on doing in the next version of Zorin OS, we need to make sure that the software store and the application delivery frameworks and mechanisms work really well in both regards, so that users don't really notice the difference between Flatpak, Snap, and traditional apt packages. And in that regard, we just need to make sure that everything is well integrated, in the fact that IT administrators would be able to roll back or roll forward updates as needed. So it's just making sure that we can continually invest in making sure that everything works really well and is really well integrated into the environment. So that might also come in the trade-off of reduced customizability and granular control over some aspects of the system. But in the case of IT administrators who care more about a working environment than something that's super configurable, we think it's a good trade-off to make. And we'd want to be able to support both kinds of environments.